US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin is urging Israel to do more to protect civilians as they go after Hamas. He said that the protection of Palestinian civilians in Gaza was both a moral responsibility and strategic imperative. Well, the Hamas-run Palestinian Health Ministry says 316 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since the end of the truce. Joining me now from Tel Aviv is the senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister, Mark Regev. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. Perhaps we can start with the hostage situation, if you will. Spokesman Elon Levy said today the Israeli government would consider a serious proposal from Hamas to release more hostages. What would be Israel's terms and conditions for another truce?
Well, the discussions broke off because they were in an impasse and there was no movement. And Hamas had reneged on understandings reached. They had okayed a list of women and children, and then suddenly they couldn't deliver what they said they would deliver. And Israel wasn't willing to play games, and especially after they opened fire us early on Friday morning, it was back to combat. And as you know, we've been now hitting Hamas hard, hitting their military structure, their underground network of fortifications and tunnels, as well as trying to target, and we have succeeded, senior Hamas commanders.
Mossad withdrew its negotiating team from Qatar then yesterday. Does that mean talks and contact have completely stopped?
Well, obviously people can still talk, but if you're asking me, is there a hope for a new deal sometime soon? Well, the truth is, if Hamas had wanted to extend the humanitarian pause, they could have had it by just releasing more hostages that they have. They refused to do so, and they are responsible for the breakdown of talks, and that's why we're back in combat. But it's not just Israel that has pointed the finger at Hamas for the failure of the further release of hostages. Other parties who are party to the agreements that were reached have also pointed the finger at Hamas. So I think you can believe Hamas if you want to, but it's clear that they were responsible for the failure to move forward on the humanitarian pause.
So if we were going to have another pause, another truce, what would Israel's terms and conditions be?
I would say the following. First and foremost, they should honour what was already decided and was already agreed to and what they committed to. And their failure to do so, how can one talk about moving forward if Hamas couldn't honour what it already committed to do?
So you are carrying out your mission against Hamas, and of course innocent civilians continue tragically to be caught up in that. We've seen some harrowing footage today of young children mourning over a tiny toddler who's been killed. It is hard to watch, I'm sure you'll agree. The US Vice President says Israel must do more to protect civilians like this youngster. Why isn't Israel doing more to prevent scenes like this?
Jonathan, we are doing more. And that's why this time we're doing a program of micro-targeting where we have specified specific areas where we know there will be combat, not the entire city of Khan Yunis, but specific neighborhoods inside Khan Yunis where we know we have to fight because that's where Hamas has its military infrastructure, that's where senior Hamas commanders are. That's where we have targets that if we want to destroy Hamas, we have to hit those targets. And so we've said in these specified areas inside the city, we're asking civilians to vacate the area, and we've even designated zones, safer zones for them to go to. And the idea is we want to see...
You're talking about this digital map with the QR code?
Not just the digital map, it's also been, these details have been dropped in leaflets, these details have been, broadcast in the radio and on television. And the truth is, I've seen today the pictures. Residents of those neighborhoods are moving. They have got the message, and they understand that it's best and it's safer to get out of a zone of expected combat. It's common sense. And in making this information public, I think it shows how we are committed in Israel to keeping civilians out of the crossfire between the Israeli Defense Forces and the Hamas terrorists.
You're committed, but why then is the US Vice President saying that Israel needs to do more? Why is the US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin saying, I've repeatedly made clear to Israel's leaders that protecting Palestinian civilians in Gaza is both a moral responsibility and a strategic imperative? Why does he need to repeatedly say it if you're doing it?
Well, first of all, we accept these principles. For us also, we don't want to see a single innocent civilian, especially not children, caught up in the crossfire between us and the Hamas terrorists. For us, it is also a moral imperative, as it is a strategic imperative. They both go hand in hand. And what our problem is, what our challenge is we face a brutal and horrific enemy, Hamas, who has no qualms whatsoever about embedding its military machine under civilian neighborhoods, under hospitals, even in schools and in mosques. This is the brutal nature of Hamas, and it's not just Israel who says that Hamas brutalizes Gazan civilians and uses them as human shields for its war machine. The United States has said so, Great Britain has said so, the European Union has said so. This is a strategy of Hamas which is designed to sacrifice Gaza civilians on the altar of their crazy agenda. In normal countries like Israel and the United Kingdom, the job of the military is to protect the civilians. Hamas, in a perverted way, warps that, inverts that, and says the job of the civilians is to protect Hamas's military machine.
Yeah. Given everything you've said about wanting to protect civilians as much as you can, we know nearly 2 million people have been displaced from their homes. We've heard the spokesman from UNICEF saying there is nowhere safe to go in Gaza. Is he wrong? Where is safe? Where can you guarantee is safe for people of Gaza to go?
Well, people have left their homes because they've heeded our warnings to get out of the crossfire, and that has saved lives.
Where can they go?
There are specified areas in the maps. The people of Gaza are now moving there, voting with their feet, accepting our advice, heeding the warnings to get out of combat zones. And there are pictures, I've seen them, I don't know if they've been shown of Sky, of civilians moving out of expected areas of combat into these safer zones. And there's not one or two, there's a whole series of safer zones. And what we're urging is the humanitarian organizations, the UN and others, to go to those zones, to provide people there with shelter, with food, with water, with medicine.
Sorry, Mr. Regev, for interrupting, but let's talk about one of those zones, somewhere that you said was safe for people to go, Al-Mawazi. Our team went there 2 days ago. It is a barren wasteland. We can show you some picture. There is no infrastructure there. There are a few ragged tents that people have put up themselves. We're told by the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees that the UN isn't giving any assistance to anyone in Al-Mawazi. You talk about water and safety. There are no UN facilities in this area at all. We've seen it with our own eyes.
And you are correct. And the UN has been very negligent because we've been giving these zones to the UN for days now. And yet their policy is they can't put material there, they can't put humanitarian aid there because people haven't moved there. And now that people have moved there, maybe they'll start. They can't be seen, they say, to be partnering with Israel in our war effort. So fine, they had to wait until now. Now, unfortunately, at the very last moment, I hope they will move their humanitarian effort to these places. It's only a pity and very sad they haven't done so until now.
Well, this is what the UN say to us. They say this is Bedouin farmland. There's no infrastructure there. When they did something similar in Bangladesh, when they set up Cox's Bazar, a big, safe space there, it took them 3 months to get the infrastructure right, to get food and water and power that was needed. 3 months, and yet you've given just days.
So, first of all, they haven't used all the days we've given them for all sorts of political reasons that I don't understand. If their operation is designed to administer humanitarian relief to the people of Gaza, they should have been there already. But there are political reasons, obviously, that prevented them from doing it. They should do it now. And if it takes time, it's a pity. They should have been there already. They can only blame themselves. And, of course, we understand that this is an ongoing operation, that it will take time, but they should have started already to meet the people who are coming there. So once again, Israel will do all we can. So it's ultimately a matter of managing risk. Is it safer for people to stay in areas of combat, or is it better that they leave? And it's common sense that people leave areas of combat. I think that's very simple.
Yeah, well, we spoke to a man yesterday. He's in our report from our chief correspondent. You may have seen it, Mohammed Reyes. He says that he used the map, he used the information you're provided with those leaflets, he moved, and then he still got bombed.
So I would be very cautious with that sort of information, because everyone who lives in parts of Gaza still controlled by Hamas could not speak out freely because they're living under Hamas control, and Hamas is not a democratic government. It rules with an iron fist and is very brutal if someone speaks out against the public line, especially to international media. So, of course, it'll all be Israel's fault. But when this is over and we've destroyed Hamas, you will see hundreds of thousands of Gazans stand up and condemn Hamas for starting this war, for breaking the ceasefire and bringing this destruction and this war upon the people of Gaza that is hurting them very, very tragically. But it is Hamas's responsibility. We didn't want this war. We didn't start this war. It's all Hamas. It's Hamas that is butchering and has butchered Israeli civilians. And it is Hamas that wants to sacrifice every last Gazan civilian on the altar of its radical extreme agenda. The people of Gaza know that better than anyone else.
Are you concerned, given the comments from the Vice President and from the US Defence Secretary, that the longer this war goes on, the less sympathetic the international community will be?
I think people have to understand, if one wants to do this right, if one wants to limit collateral damage, if one wants to limit civilians being caught up in the crossfire, one has to do this judiciously. And you can't rush. It has to take time if we want to do this properly. But our goal will be reached.
Or are we talking months?
As long as it takes. We will destroy Hamas's military machine. We will end their political control over Gaza. And that obviously will be good for Israel, because we won't have to live next to this terrorist enclave on our border and see them butcher our people ever again. But it's also ultimately good. It's good for the people of Gaza too. Hamas has been in power in Gaza for 16 years, Jonathan. And what have they brought the people of Gaza? Misery, bloodshed and poverty. The people of Gaza also deserve better than this terrible terrorist regime.
And finally, what's the priority at the moment, do you think? Destroying Hamas or bringing the hostages home?
There's no contradiction. They both go hand in hand. Do you think Hamas would have released a single hostage if it wasn't under the military pressure of the IDF? They didn't suddenly release all those people, over 100, because they became humanitarians, they became Boy Scouts. No. They only did it because the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, was placing massive pressure on them, and they wanted a timeout. And we said we would only agree to a comprehensive pause for the release of our people. We forced them to do it. And so military pressure is the best way to expedite the freedom of our hostages.
OK, we must leave it there. Mark Regev, advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
More from